Before we begin this story about the power of courage and Hell's Angels Brotherhood, tell us in the comments where you're watching from. What city, what state are you joining us from today? At the end of this story, you'll understand why angels never forget, and why one moment of bravery from a bullied deaf child can change everything. The afternoon sun was hitting that perfect Nevada angle where everything turns golden and harsh at the same time. Sarah Martinez was doing what she did every day after school, making herself invisible. 13 years old, black, deaf since birth, she walked home with her eyes down and her notepad clutched against her chest like a shield. The notepad was everything to Sarah. Her voice, her connection to a hearing world that mostly pretended she didn't exist. The kids at school had long ago decided that deaf meant stupid, that black meant other, that different meant target. So Sarah had learned to be small, to be quiet in ways that had nothing to do with sound, to move through her Nevada middle school like a ghost nobody wanted to see. She was cutting through the alley behind Main Street, because the long way meant less chance of running into the kids who liked to mock her signs, who would grab her notepad and throw it, who would stand behind her and say cruel things. They knew she couldn't hear, but she could see the cruelty in their laughing faces. Sarah had learned to read lips when she was 6, and she'd learned to read cruelty long before that. Her mama worked double shifts at the hospital in the next town over. Her daddy had left when Sarah was 5, right after the diagnosis, like her deafness was something he couldn't handle. Like his baby girl not hearing was somehow a personal failure he couldn't bear to witness. So it was just Sarah and her mama, in their small house on the edge of town. Mama was always working, always tired, always sorry she couldn't be there more, but needing to keep the lights on, Sarah's hearing aids maintained, and food on the table. The bar on Main Street was called Lies, and Sarah usually gave it wide clearance because bars meant unpredictable drunk people. And Sarah had learned that unpredictable was dangerous for a girl who couldn't hear someone coming up behind her. But today, she had seen them. 5 men. And she'd lived in this town long enough to know when something was wrong. They weren't walking like normal people. They were moving like hunters, like men with purpose and weapons. Sarah had seen the guns tucked into their waistbands, seen the way they were positioning themselves around Lies' parking lot, where about 30 motorcycles were parked in neat formation, their chrome gleaming in that golden Nevada light. Sarah's heart had started hammering because she recognized those motorcycles. Everybody in town knew the Hells Angels chapter that met at Lies on Thursday afternoons. Everybody knew you left them alone. You didn't cause trouble. You showed respect. These were men who rode through town in formation, who helped at the Veterans Day parade, who'd raised money when the elementary school burned down 3 years ago. Sarah's teacher, Mrs. Washington, one of the only black teachers at the school, and the only adult who'd ever learned a few signs to talk to Sarah, had told her once that the Hells Angels lived by a code, that they took care of their own and protected their community. And now, 5 men with guns were surrounding their bikes, waiting. Sarah stood frozen in that alley for maybe 10 seconds, her mind racing. She was 13. She was deaf. She was bullied every single day. Nobody at school even knew her name unless they were using it to mock her. She could walk away right now. She could go home, do her homework, eat dinner alone like always. And tomorrow those motorcycles might not be parked there anymore. Those 30 men inside Lies might not be alive to ride them, and nobody would ever know Sarah Martinez had seen anything. But Mrs. Washington's words kept echoing in Sarah's mind. Not in sound, because nothing echoed in sound for Sarah, but in memory, in the shape of Mrs. Washington's kind mouth forming the words, "They protect their community, baby. They live by honor." And Sarah thought about how nobody had ever protected her, how she spent every day being invisible, how it felt to need help and never receive it. And she thought, maybe if I help them, somebody will finally see me. Maybe if I save them, I'll matter to someone. Maybe if I'm brave for 5 minutes, I can stop being invisible forever. So Sarah Martinez, 13 years old, deaf, bullied, terrified, walked straight toward Lai's front door, while 5 armed men positioned themselves for an ambush that would have killed every Hell's Angel inside that bar. The moment she pushed through Lai's door, every head turned. The bar was darker than the outside, and it took Sarah's eyes a second to adjust. She saw them immediately. The leather vests with the death head patch, the bandanas, the beards, the tattoos. 30 men, maybe more, sitting at tables in the bar, drinking beer, and laughing about something Sarah couldn't hear. The laughter stopped when they saw her. A 13-year-old black girl in a school uniform, clutching a notepad, wide-eyed and breathing hard. The biggest man Sarah had ever seen stood up from a corner booth. He had to be 6'5", 300 pounds of muscle and leather, with a gray beard down to his chest and arms covered in ink. The patch on his vest said, "Road Captain," and above it was the name Reaper. He walked towards Sarah, and she saw his face wasn't angry. It was concerned. He was moving slowly, carefully, the way you approach a scared animal. He held up both hands, showing her he wasn't a threat. "You okay, little sister?" Reaper said, and Sarah read his lips perfectly because she'd been reading lips her whole life. Sarah's hands were shaking so hard she could barely grip her pencil, but she wrote as fast as she'd ever written in her life, her letters messy and frantic. "Bad men with guns outside, 5 of them hiding by the bikes. They're going to hurt you." She thrust the notepad at Reaper, and he took it, his eyes scanning the words. Sarah watched his face change, watched concern become comprehension, become cold fury, become tactical focus in the space of 3 seconds. Reaper turned to the bar and made a hand signal. Every single Hell's Angel in that room stood up at once. No panic, no chaos. Just 30 men moving with military precision, because that's what they were. Veterans, soldiers, men who'd seen combat and knew how to respond to threats. "Call the sheriff," Reaper said to the bartender, his voice calm and controlled. "Tell him we got 5 armed men outside Lai's preparing an ambush. Tell him we got them contained and we're not engaging, but he needs to get here now." He looked down at Sarah, and his eyes were gentle, despite his terrifying appearance. "You stay here behind the bar, little sister. You just saved our lives. We're going to make sure you're safe." The next 15 minutes moved like a dream for Sarah. She crouched behind the bar next to the bartender, an older white man with kind eyes who kept giving her thumbs up and mouthing, "You're so brave," while the Hell's Angels positioned themselves defensively inside Lai's. They didn't go outside. They didn't engage. They just waited with the discipline of men who knew that the best fight was the one you didn't have to have. Through the window, Sarah could see the 5 armed men getting confused, their plan falling apart because their targets weren't coming outside into their trap. The sheriff arrived with 6 deputies, sirens wailing, and arrested all 5 men without a shot fired. Turned out, they were members of a rival motorcycle club from California, trying to start a war by taking out Nevada's Hell's Angels leadership in one coordinated attack. Turned out, Sarah Martinez, 13-year-old deaf girl who got bullied every day, had just prevented a massacre. When the sheriff cleared the scene, Reaper came behind the bar and knelt down so he was at Sarah's eye level. Up close, she could see that his eyes were blue and tired and had seen too much violence, but were looking at her like she was something precious. "What's your name, little sister?" he asked, and Sarah wrote it down. "Sarah Martinez. I'm 13. I'm deaf. I saw them hiding. Reaper read the notepad, and Sarah watched his throat work as he swallowed hard. Sarah Martinez, he said slowly, making sure she could read his lips. You just saved 30 lives. You saw evil, and you ran toward it instead of away from it. That makes you braver than most men I've ever known. Can I ask you something? Sarah nodded, unable to believe this was happening, unable to believe someone was finally seeing her. Why? Reaper asked. Why'd you risk yourself for us? You don't know us. Sarah picked up her pencil and wrote carefully, her hand steadier now. Because Mrs. Washington said you protect your community. Because nobody ever protects me. Because I wanted to matter to someone. Because it was right. When Reaper read those words, Sarah watched a tear slide down his weathered face and disappear into his gray beard. He stood up, turned to his brothers, and said in a voice that carried through the whole bar, This little sister just saved our lives. She's 13. She's deaf. She's bullied at her school, and she ran straight into danger to warn us when she could have walked away. I want to know everything about her situation, and I want to know it tonight. Sarah didn't understand what that meant. She just knew that for the first time in her life, somebody had called her brave. Somebody had said she mattered. Somebody had seen her. Reaper walked Sarah home that evening, his massive motorcycle moving slowly beside her as she walked, other Hell's Angels forming a protective convoy behind them. When they reached Sarah's small house on the edge of town, Mama was just getting home from her shift, and her face went from terrified to confused to overwhelmed as Reaper explained slowly, clearly, making sure Sarah could read his lips too, exactly what her daughter had done. Mama grabbed Sarah and held her so tight Sarah couldn't breathe. When Mama pulled back, she was crying and signing, My brave girl! My brave, brave girl! Reaper asked Mama questions that night, while Sarah sat between them on their worn couch. He asked about the bullying. He asked about school. He asked why nobody was protecting this child, who'd just proven she had more courage than most adults would ever know. And Mama, exhausted and heartbroken and relieved, told him everything. Told him about the kids who tormented Sarah daily. Told him about the school administrators who said kids will be kids. Told him about how Sarah came home crying 3 days a week, but refused to let Mama see it because she didn't want to add to her mother's burdens. Told him about how Sarah's deafness made her a target, how being black made her a target, how being different made her a target, and how 13-year-old Sarah Martinez had learned to survive by being invisible. When Reaper left that night, he shook Mama's hand and then Sarah's, and he looked Sarah dead in the eyes and said something she would never forget. You saved us. Now we're going to save you. Sarah didn't know what that meant. She went to bed that night thinking it was just words, just kindness from a grateful stranger, just something people said but didn't mean. She'd heard variations of that promise her whole life, from counselors who did nothing, from teachers who forgot her, from kids who pretended to befriend her and then betrayed her. Words were cheap. Protection was fantasy. Tomorrow she'd wake up and go to school and be invisible again, be bullied again, be alone again. That was just how life worked for girls like Sarah Martinez. She had no idea that at that exact moment, Reaper was making a phone call that would change everything. Reaper wasn't just any Hell's Angel. He was the road captain of the Silver State chapter, which meant he had direct lines to every chapter president in the Western region. And that night, he made exactly one phone call to the Nevada State chapter president, a man called Ice, who'd been a Hell's Angel for 40 years and who commanded respect from every chapter from California to Colorado. Reaper told Ice what had happened. He told him about the ambush that was prevented, about the 30 lives that were saved, about the 13-year-old deaf black girl who'd run straight into danger because she believed Hell's Angels protected their community. He told ICE about the bullying, about the isolation, about how Sara Martinez had saved them while her own school refused to save her. He told ICE about how Sara had written, "I wanted to matter to someone," on her notepad, and how that had broken something in Reaper's heart that he didn't even know could still break. ICE listened to everything Reaper said, and when Reaper finished, there was silence on the line for a long moment. Then ICE said words that would echo through the entire Western Hells Angels network. "That little sister saved 30 of our brothers. She's one of ours now. Spread the word. We're going to make sure she knows she matters. We're going to make sure she's protected. We're going to make sure she never feels invisible again. Call every chapter from here to California. Tell them what she did. Tell them we're riding for her. And tell them angels never forget." That phone call sparked a mobilization that would become legend in Hells Angels history. Within 24 hours, the story of Sara Martinez had been posted to every Hells Angels forum and group chat in the Western United States. A 13-year-old deaf black girl who saved 30 angels. A child who'd been bullied and abandoned by her school and her community, but who'd run straight toward danger to protect brothers she didn't even know. A little sister who'd proven that courage had nothing to do with size or age or ability to hear, and everything to do with the size of your heart. Chapters started responding immediately. Riverside, California. "Our brothers are ready to ride. Give us a destination." Reno, Nevada. "Tell us what she needs. We're raising funds." Phoenix, Arizona. "That little sister is ours now. What's the plan?" Salt Lake City, Utah. "When we riding? How many we bringing?" Oakland, California. "Post her school's address. We want to have a conversation with that administration." Within 48 hours, ICE had a plan. It wasn't just about showing up. Hells Angels didn't just show up. They mobilized with purpose, with strategy, with the kind of force that made sure the message was received and understood and never forgotten. The plan had 3 parts. First, establish permanent protection for Sara at school. Second, fund a comprehensive anti-bullying program that would actually work. Third, make sure Sara Martinez understood she was family now, that she'd earned her place in the Hells Angels community, that she would never be invisible again. The fundraising started on a Friday night. ICE posted Sara's story to the National Hells Angels Network with a PayPal link and a message. "This little sister saved 30 of our brothers. Let's show her what brotherhood means. Target $200,000 for anti-bullying programs and Sara's future education fund. Let's make it happen." Within 6 hours, they'd raised $150,000. Within 24 hours, they'd hit $200,000. By Sunday night, they'd raised $247,000 from Hells Angels chapters in 18 states, from individual members who'd never met Sara, but who understood what her courage meant, from old ladies and families who'd heard the story and wanted to help. But the money was just the beginning. ICE coordinated with every chapter president in Nevada, California, Arizona, and Utah. He explained the plan. They were going to Sara's school on Monday morning. They were going to show up in numbers that couldn't be ignored. They were going to volunteer as legal security personnel. Many Hells Angels were veterans with security training, and Nevada law allowed volunteer security at schools with proper clearance. They were going to establish a rotating guard of 10 angels at Sara's school every single day. They were going to fund the anti-bullying program. They were going to have a very direct conversation with the school administration about protecting vulnerable students. And they were going to make Sara Martinez a Hells Angels little sister, which meant she was under the club's protection for life. "How many we bringing?" Reaper asked Ice on Sunday night. Ice was quiet for a moment, doing the math in his head, tallying up the chapters who'd confirmed, the members who'd committed to riding, the brothers who were taking time off work to make this happen. Then he smiled, a cold smile that promised justice. Tell Sarah's mama we're bringing 600. Tell her we're bringing brothers from 4 states. Tell her Monday morning at 9 a.m. the Hells Angels are going to show Sarah Martinez what it means to matter. 600 Hells Angels from California, Nevada, Arizona, and Utah. Road captains and chapter presidents and sergeants at arms and veteran members and prospects who'd begged to be included. Because even the newest members understood that this mobilization was about honor, about the code, about proving that when one person saves your brothers, the entire brotherhood responds with overwhelming force. They planned the logistics like a military operation, because most of them were military. Convoy formation, arrival timing, legal coordination with the sheriff's department, communication with the school district superintendent, who suddenly became very cooperative when Ice explained that 600 Hells Angels were arriving Monday morning, whether the school liked it or not. They arranged for the school assembly, for the media coverage, for the presentation of Sarah's protective vest. They prepared the anti-bullying program proposal, the volunteer security rotation schedule, the education fund paperwork. Every detail was handled with the precision of men who understood that this moment would define what Hells Angels brotherhood meant. And through all of this, Sarah Martinez had no idea. She went to school on Monday morning the same way she always did. Invisible, alone, bracing herself for another day of being tormented and ignored. Her mama had been acting strange all weekend, smiling at her phone, crying for no reason, hugging Sarah tighter than normal. But mama worked constantly and was always stressed, so Sarah just figured it was one of those things. She had no idea her mother had been coordinating with Reaper and Ice. She had no idea what was about to happen. She just walked into school on Monday morning, expecting the same hell she faced every day. First period was English, and Sarah was sitting in her usual seat in the back corner, far from everyone, invisible, safe, when the principal's voice came over the PA system, announcing an emergency assembly in the gymnasium. The whole school was required to attend immediately. Sarah followed her class to the gym, confused because emergency assemblies usually meant something bad had happened. A student death, a threat, something terrible. The gymnasium was already filling with students when Sarah's class arrived. Teachers were lining kids up by grade, and Sarah found her spot with the other 8th graders, standing in the back because she was always in the back. The principal, Mr. Hendricks, a thin white man who'd ignored Sarah's bullying complaints for 2 years, was standing at center court, looking pale and nervous, which was weird. The school counselor, Ms. Rodriguez, was there too, and Mrs. Washington and several other teachers Sarah recognized. They all looked tense, expectant, like they were waiting for something. Then Sarah felt it, a vibration through the gymnasium floor. At first, she thought it was an earthquake, but it was too rhythmic, too constant. The vibration grew stronger, and Sarah saw students starting to look around, confused. Then she saw it through the gymnasium windows. Motorcycles. Dozens of them. No, hundreds of them. Filling the parking lot, filling the streets, filling every available space around the school. Chrome gleaming in the Nevada morning sun. Leather vests with patches. American flags mounted on handlebars. The largest mobilization of motorcycles Sarah had ever seen in her life. Students rushed to the windows. Teachers tried to maintain order, and Mr. Hendricks looked like he might faint. Sarah stood frozen, her heart pounding, because she recognized those vests, those patches, the organization. Hells Angels, hundreds of them, at her school, and she had no idea why. The gymnasium doors opened, and they started walking in. Not all 600. That would have been chaos. But 20 of them entered the gym in formation, walking with military precision down the center aisle. Leather vests displaying their patches, road captain ranks, chapter president positions. Reaper was in front, 6'5" of intimidating brotherhood, and next to him was an even more imposing figure, Ice, the Nevada state president, a man in his 60s with steel gray hair and eyes that had seen everything and feared nothing. The gymnasium went dead silent. 800 students and 50 teachers watching 20 Hells Angels walk to center court like they owned the school. Behind them, through the open doors, Sarah could see the parking lot. An ocean of motorcycles, an ocean of leather-vested bikers, hundreds of Hells Angels standing in formation outside her school. The message was clear, without a single word being spoken. We're here. We're not leaving. Pay attention. Ice took the microphone from Mr. Hendrix's shaking hand, and his voice carried through the gym with authority that demanded respect. Good morning. My name is Ice, and I'm the Nevada State President of the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club. We're here this morning because 6 days ago, one of your students saved the lives of 30 of our brothers. Sarah felt her stomach drop. No. They couldn't be talking about her. This couldn't be about her. But Reaper was scanning the crowd, and then his eyes found her in the back, and he pointed directly at her. Sarah Martinez, Ice said, reading from Reaper's gesture. Please come down here. Every student in the gymnasium turned to look at Sarah, the deaf girl, the bullied girl, the invisible girl who nobody knew and nobody cared about. Sarah felt her legs go numb, felt panic rising in her throat. But Mrs. Washington was suddenly there beside her, gentle hands on her shoulders, guiding her forward. It's okay, baby, Mrs. Washington whispered, knowing Sarah couldn't hear, but hoping she'd understand. They're here for you. They're here to protect you. Sarah walked down that center aisle on legs that didn't feel like her own, past students who'd bullied her, past kids who'd pretended she didn't exist, past teachers who'd failed to protect her. The 20 Hells Angels parted to let her through, and suddenly, Sarah was standing at center court, caught between Reaper and Ice, surrounded by the largest, most terrifying men she'd ever seen, men who were looking at her like she was something precious, something worthy of protection, something that mattered. Ice knelt down so he was at Sarah's eye level, and he started speaking slowly, clearly, making sure she could read every word on his lips. Sarah, 6 days ago, you saw 5 armed men preparing to ambush 30 Hells Angels at Lai's bar. You didn't know us. You had every reason to walk away and pretend you hadn't seen anything. But instead, you ran straight into that bar and warned us. You saved 30 lives. You prevented a massacre. You did something most grown men wouldn't have the courage to do. Ice paused, letting Sarah process, letting the words sink in. The gymnasium was so quiet, Sarah could feel the silence. You wrote on your notepad that you wanted to matter to someone, Ice continued, and Sarah felt tears starting because she couldn't believe he knew that. Couldn't believe he'd remembered. You wrote that nobody ever protects you. Well, little sister, that changes today, because in the Hells Angels, we live by a code. We never forget. We take care of those who take care of us. We protect our own. And Sarah, you're one of ours now. Reaper stepped forward, holding something. A small leather vest, black and supple, with patches that read, Angel's Little Sister and Sarah Martinez, and the Hells Angels Death Head logo. This is your vest, Reaper said, his voice thick with emotion. This means you're under Hell's Angels' protection for life. This means nobody touches you. Nobody threatens you. Nobody hurts you. This means you matter. You've always mattered, but now everybody's going to know it. Ice helped Sarah put the vest on over her school uniform, and it fit perfectly because they'd gotten her measurements from Mama. Sarah looked down at the patches, at the Death Head logo, at her own name stitched in leather, and she started crying. Really crying. The kind of crying that comes from 13 years of being invisible, of being bullied, of being alone, of wondering if anybody would ever see her. And now, 600 Hell's Angels had mobilized from 4 states to make sure she knew she was seen. But Ice wasn't done. There are 600 Hell's Angels outside this school right now, he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the gymnasium. Brothers from California, Nevada, Arizona, and Utah. They're here because Sarah Martinez saved our family, but they're also here to make sure this school understands that this little sister is protected. He looked directly at Mr. Hendricks, and his voice got cold. Now, starting today, there will be 10 Hell's Angels volunteering as security at this school every single day. He paused. And if we hear that anyone, student or staff, bullies Sarah, threatens her, or makes her feel unsafe, those 10 volunteers will become 100. And if it happens again, 100 will become 600. Do I make myself clear? Mr. Hendricks nodded so fast his glasses nearly fell off. Yes, sir. Absolutely clear, sir. Good. Ice turned back to Sarah. We've also established a $200,000 fund. Half goes to anti-bullying programs at this school. Real programs that actually protect kids like you. The other half is yours for your education, for college, for whatever you need. Hell's Angels take care of their own, and your family now. Sarah couldn't stop crying. She was shaking, overwhelmed, unable to believe this was real. Through her tears, she saw something that made her heart nearly stop. Ice was signing. His hands were moving in American Sign Language, the language Sarah had used her whole life, but that nobody at school had ever bothered to learn. We see you, he signed slowly, making sure Sarah understood every gesture. You are brave. You are family. You are protected. And then Reaper was signing too. The massive, terrifying road captain had learned sign language in the 6 days since he'd met Sarah. Angels never forget, he signed, his huge hands making the gestures with surprising gentleness. We love you, little sister. Sarah's hands came up automatically, signing back through her tears. Thank you. Thank you for seeing me. The gymnasium erupted. Students were crying. Teachers were crying. And the 20 Hell's Angels standing at center court were trying very hard to maintain their intimidating presence while wiping tears from their own eyes. Mrs. Washington was sobbing openly, holding on to the bleachers because her legs were shaking. Even Mr. Hendricks looked moved, though that might have been fear, because Ice had made very clear what would happen if Sarah was ever bullied again. Ice raised his hand for silence, and the gymnasium went quiet again. I want every student in this school to understand something, he said, and his voice had the weight of absolute authority. Hell's Angels protect the vulnerable. We defend those who can't defend themselves. We show up for people who've been abandoned by everyone else. Sarah Martinez proves she understands that code better than most adults I know. She saved us. We're saving her. This is what brotherhood looks like. This is what honor looks like. This is what it means to never forget. He looked around the gymnasium, making eye contact with students, with teachers, with administrators, and to anyone who ever thought about bullying this little sister, to anyone who ever made her feel small or worthless or invisible, you need to understand that you're looking at a girl who has 600 Hell's Angels protecting her. Now we know who you are. We've heard the stories, and we're watching. Choose better. The message was received. Sarah could see it in the faces around the gymnasium. Shame, fear, understanding, respect. The invisible girl was invisible no more. The bullied girl was untouchable now. Sarah Martinez, 13-year-old deaf girl who'd been tormented for years, was standing at center court, surrounded by 20 Hell's Angels, wearing a vest that said she was family. Ice turned back to Sarah and held up one finger. Hold on. He walked to the gymnasium doors and made a hand signal. And through the open doors came the sound Sarah would never forget. 600 motorcycle engines starting simultaneously. The floor vibrated, the windows rattled, and every person in that gymnasium felt the power of 600 Hell's Angels announcing their presence. Then, in perfect coordination, the engines revved 3 times. A salute, a promise, a declaration that Sarah Martinez was protected by the full force of Hell's Angels Brotherhood. Reaper knelt down next to Sarah one more time. Do you understand what this means? He asked, making sure she could read his lips. Sarah nodded, unable to speak, unable to sign, able only to cry and hold on to the vest that proved she mattered. You're never alone again, Reaper said. You've got 600 brothers. Now you've got a family that will never abandon you. You saved us, and we're going to spend the rest of our lives making sure you know you're worth saving too. Sarah managed to lift her hands and sign. Why me? Reaper smiled, a gentle smile that transformed his intimidating face into something kind. Because you ran toward danger instead of away from it. Because you cared about strangers when nobody cared about you. Because you proved that courage doesn't need to hear to be heard. Because you're exactly the kind of person we protect. Because you're one of us. The assembly ended with the school administrators hastily explaining the new anti-bullying program, the volunteer security rotation, the resources now available to students. But nobody was paying attention to the administrators. Everyone was watching Sarah Martinez in her Hell's Angels little sister vest, surrounded by 20 bikers who looked at her like she was worth dying for, standing in front of a school that had ignored her for years but would never dare ignore her again. When Sarah finally walked outside after the assembly, she saw it fully for the first time. 600 motorcycles filling every space around her school. 600 Hell's Angels in leather vests standing in formation, nodding at her as she passed. Road captains from California, chapter presidents from Arizona, veterans from Utah, members from Nevada, all united by one thing: respect for a 13-year-old girl who'd saved their brothers and proved that true courage had nothing to do with size or strength or ability to hear. Sarah's mama was there, crying and holding Sarah's little brother, whom Sarah barely got to see because Mama worked so much. Reaper had brought them, had made sure they witnessed this moment. Mama signed to Sarah, "My brave girl saved angels. Now angels save my brave girl." Over the next weeks, Sarah's life transformed in ways she couldn't have imagined. The bullying stopped completely. Not because kids suddenly became good people, but because 10 Hell's Angels were at school every day, standing at the entrance, walking the halls, making their presence known. The volunteers were professional, friendly, helpful to all students, but everyone understood the real reason they were there. Sarah Martinez was untouchable. The anti-bullying program launched with $100,000 in funding And it actually worked because it was designed by people who understood that bullying thrived in silence and indifference, not because kids were naturally cruel, but because adults failed to protect vulnerable children. Mrs. Washington led the program, and suddenly, the school administration was very interested in making sure every student felt safe. Sarah's college fund grew as more donations came in from Hell's Angels nationwide, who'd heard her story. By Christmas, it was $180,000, enough for undergraduate and graduate education, enough to give Sarah opportunities she'd never dreamed possible. But the biggest change was internal. Sarah started walking with her head up. She started signing openly instead of hiding her hands. She started making friends, real friends, kids who wanted to know her, who were learning sign language to communicate with her, who invited her to sit with them at lunch. And every morning when Sarah arrived at school, 10 Hell's Angels were there, and they'd sign, "Good morning, little sister." Because all the volunteers had learned ASL, Reaper became a constant presence in Sarah's life. He visited her and Mama twice a week, checked in on how school was going, made sure Sarah felt safe and supported. He'd learned full ASL and could have complete signed conversations with Sarah. He brought her books about deaf culture and famous deaf Americans, helped her understand that being deaf wasn't a limitation. It was just a different way of experiencing the world. He told her she was part of two communities now, the deaf community that shared her experience and the Hell's Angels family that would protect her forever. 6 months after the school assembly, Sarah stood up in her English class and gave a presentation about courage. She spoke, her voice unclear and modulated strangely because she'd never heard it. But she spoke anyway, while Mrs. Washington signed alongside her for clarity. "I used to think courage meant being fearless," Sarah said, the words practiced 100 times with her speech therapist. "But courage is being terrified and doing the right thing anyway. Courage is running toward danger instead of away. Courage is believing you matter, even when everyone tells you that you don't." The class gave her a standing ovation, and through the classroom window, Sarah could see 4 Hell's Angels on security duty that day. They were clapping too, their massive hands coming together in appreciation for the little sister who'd saved their family and found her own. At the end of the school year, Sarah's grades had improved dramatically because she wasn't spending all her energy on surviving bullying anymore. She'd made honor roll for the first time ever. She'd joined the school's art club. She'd started a sign language class that 15 students had enrolled in. The invisible girl had become the most visible, most protected, most celebrated student at her school, not because of pity, but because she'd earned respect through courage. On the last day of school, Ice and Reaper came to pick Sarah up personally. They were taking her to a Hell's Angels regional gathering, 2,000 members from across the West, all of whom wanted to meet the little sister who'd saved 30 brothers and reminded everyone what the code was really about. Sarah wore her vest proudly, Mama beside her, little brother wide-eyed at all the motorcycles. At the gathering, Ice introduced Sarah to the crowd. "This is Sarah Martinez," he announced, and 2,000 bikers erupted in applause. "Last October, this 13-year-old girl saw 5 armed men preparing to ambush 30 of our brothers. She ran straight into danger to warn us. She saved our family. She proved that courage lives in the hearts of those willing to act when action is needed. She showed us that one moment of bravery can change everything." Ice looked at Sarah, making sure she could read his lips. "In Hell's Angels, we say angels never forget. We mean it. Sarah, you're our family now. You're protected by every chapter, every member, every brother and sister in this organization. You're proof that when you help one angel, you help them all. And when one little sister saves our brothers, 600 angels respond." The crowd roared, engines revved, and Sarah felt something she'd never felt before in her life. Complete, absolute safety. She was surrounded by 2,000 bikers who would have died to protect her. She was loved by a family she'd never expected to have. She mattered to people who understood that mattering was everything. Reaper knelt beside Sarah one last time that day, signing as he spoke so she'd understand every word. "You changed my life, little sister," he signed. "Before I met you, I thought I understood courage. But watching a 13-year-old deaf girl run into danger to save strangers taught me what courage really means. You reminded me why I wear this patch. You reminded me what brotherhood is for. You saved my brothers' lives. You saved my soul." Sarah signed back, tears streaming down her face. "You made me matter. You saw me when nobody else would. You protected me when nobody else could. You saved me too." And that's the story of Sarah Martinez, the 13-year-old deaf black girl who saved 30 Hells Angels and became family to 600. That's the story of how one moment of extraordinary courage mobilized an entire brotherhood to protect a child who'd been abandoned by everyone else. That's the story of why angels never forget, why small acts of bravery deserve overwhelming responses, why vulnerability doesn't mean weakness, and why sometimes the invisible girl becomes the most visible hero. There's a lesson in Sarah's story that goes deeper than just Hell's Angels brotherhood, though that brotherhood is profound and real. The lesson is this: courage isn't about size or strength or ability or privilege. Courage is about choosing to help when walking away would be safer. Courage is about believing that doing the right thing matters, even when you've been taught that you don't matter. Courage is about running toward danger to save strangers, because saving people is simply right. Sarah Martinez proved that deaf doesn't mean powerless, that 13 doesn't mean insignificant, that bullied doesn't mean broken. She proved that one girl with a notepad and enormous courage could save 30 lives and inspire 600 men to mobilize in her defense. She proved that when you live by honor, when you help those in need, when you take action despite your fear, the universe responds in overwhelming ways. The Hell's Angels Brotherhood Code of Never Forget isn't just about revenge or retaliation. It's about gratitude manifested in action. It's about protecting those who protected you. It's about recognizing courage wherever it appears and responding with overwhelming support. When Sarah ran into Lai's bar to warn 30 strangers about an ambush, she activated that code, and 600 angels responded the way they always respond when someone saves their family, with complete, unwavering, permanent protection. Today, Sarah is 15, thriving in high school, planning to attend Gallaudet University to study deaf education. She wants to become a teacher for deaf children, to show them what Mrs. Washington showed her, that being deaf is not a limitation. It's just a different way of experiencing a beautiful world. The Hells Angels still provide security at her school, though it's down to 4 volunteers daily now because the message has been received and the bullying never returned. Sarah's college fund sits at $200,000 after additional donations. Her little brother wears a miniature Hells Angels supporter shirt that Reaper gave him. Mama cries less now because her daughter is protected by an army. Sarah still has the notepad she used that day at Lai's bar. It's in a frame on her bedroom wall, open to the page where she frantically wrote, "Bad men with guns outside." Below it is another framed item, a photo from the school assembly showing Sarah in her little sister vest, surrounded by 20 Hells Angels, 600 motorcycles visible through the gymnasium windows behind her. In the photo, Sarah is crying and signing "thank you," and Reaper is signing back, "your family." That photo went viral within the Hells Angels community and beyond. It became a symbol of what happens when courage meets gratitude, when vulnerability meets protection, when one small act of bravery triggers an overwhelming response of brotherhood. That photo reminds everyone who sees it that invisible children become visible when someone finally chooses to see them. That bullied kids become protected when real men stand up for them. That deaf girls who can't hear the words, "You matter," can feel those words when 600 motorcycles arrive to prove it. The story of Sara Martinez teaches us that in a world where systems fail vulnerable children, where schools ignore bullying, where adults look away from suffering, there are still communities that live by codes of honor and protection. The Hells Angels showed up for Sara not because they had to, but because their code demanded it. She saved them. They saved her. That's brotherhood. That's what angels never forget means in action. If you've been moved by Sara's story, if you've ever felt invisible or bullied or alone, or if you've ever witnessed someone show extraordinary courage in the face of danger, share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Tell us in the comments about times you've seen courage in unexpected places, about moments when someone stood up for the vulnerable, about experiences where a small act created overwhelming responses. And if you're going through what Sara went through, if you're being bullied, if you feel invisible, if you think nobody sees you, understand that courage changes everything, that doing the right thing matters, that somewhere there are people who will protect you if you just hold on long enough to find them. Sara wants you to know you matter. Your courage matters. Your voice matters, whether spoken or signed or written. And when you use that courage to help others, despite your own pain, the universe has a way of mobilizing armies to help you back. Angels never forget. Brotherhood never fails. In the heart of Sara Martinez's extraordinary story lies a profound life lesson that resonates deeply with all of us. Courage isn't born from strength or privilege, but from the quiet resolve to do what's right, even when the world has taught you to feel invisible. At just 13, Sara, a black, deaf girl enduring relentless bullying, chose to risk everything to warn strangers of impending danger. She couldn't hear the world's cruelty, but she felt it every day. Yet in that pivotal moment, she ran toward peril instead of away, driven by a simple belief that protecting others mattered. What followed was a testament to the ripple effect of bravery. 600 Hells Angels, hardened men bound by brotherhood and honor, mobilized across states to shield her from harm, transforming her isolation into unbreakable family. This tale reminds us that vulnerability doesn't equate to weakness. It's often the birthplace of true power. In a society quick to overlook the marginalized, Sara's act illuminates how one small gesture of kindness can summon an army of support, proving that when you stand for others despite your own pain, the universe conspires to lift you up. It's a raw, emotional truth that hits home. Many of us have felt unseen, unheard, or unworthy. But Sara shows that embracing our fears and choosing empathy can rewrite our narratives, fostering connections that heal and protect. Her journey urges us to reflect. In our daily lives, how can we be the warning, the protector, or the responder? If this story moved you, share your own moments of unexpected courage or times when bravery changed your life in the comments below. We'd love to hear how it inspires you. And if you're touched by tales of resilience, unexpected alliances, and the triumph of the human spirit, hit that subscribe button to Voices of Ebony for more heart-stirring stories that celebrate Black excellence and unbreakable bonds. Together, let's remind the world that every act of valor matters. Yours could be next.